Best laid plans of mice and men oft go awry, and leave us nothing but grief and pain for promised joy. Hello and welcome. Welcome to Input English. I started with a brief quote of a poem by Robert Burns dating to the late 18th century. And that expression, best laid plans, shows up a lot in our language because it expresses a human feeling that's fairly common. We planned something, we had an expectation, and now we are disappointed by the outcome. A friend of mine says, you're better off if you don't have any expectations. Another friend of mine stated his opinion, which is an expectation is a premeditated resentment. That's an idea. Okay, so where are we and what are we doing? Well, I set out this morning to take you on a hike. So we're in the South Bay, and one of the really common hikes that people do here is the Stanford Dish. So the Stanford Dish, well, Stanford of or pertaining to Stanford University, no doubt, yes, and it's a dish. It's a dish, but it's no ordinary dish. It's not a dish you would serve anything on. It's a dish-shaped radio telescope. So the Stanford Dish was built in the early 1960s under contract from the US Air Force, and it is owned by the Air Force, and it's operated by Stanford University. It's an extraordinary machine. It's a steerable radio telescope. It's 46 meters in diameter. It's a big one, and it's been used widely since it was built for a variety of very interesting things, some of which we don't even know about. But for instance, that dish was used to communicate with the Voyager spacecrafts because other methods were impractical. Okay, so we set out this morning by car to go to the Stanford Dish for a nice long hike. The loop around that radio telescope is like 3.5 miles. So it was going to be a really nice, doable walk. It's closed. And why it's closed doesn't really matter. It's closed. So lest I break into it illegally, we're not going on that hike today. When I got into this area, it was overcast, gray skies, subdued light, and of course it's in the morning, and so the expectation was with the heating of the sun, the moisture will evaporate, the clouds and fog will dissipate, and we'll have blue skies. And that's what the weather report indicates. So here I am, substantially on the western side of Silicon Valley on Interstate 280, and my plan went away. We're not taking the Stanford Dish hike. So instead of getting all upset about it and angry, I just thought, well, what are we going to use this lovely time for? And it's only going to get better because the sun heating is going to have the skies clear up, and it's going to be a lovely day. So we are at a county park, Rancho San Antonio County Park and open space, and I'm just off the parking lot behind me, there's a big tree, and there are several of these. These are cottonwood trees, and they're fun because the shape of the stem of each leaf is flat. And with the wind blowing through these trees and through the leaves oscillate. They get into an oscillation and they shimmer. So as you look at a cottonwood, you'll see a lot of leaf movement with very little wind that causes it. Cottonwood trees need a lot of water, and so you find them near streams. And so if you're in the western part of the United States and you're in a desert and you don't see much in the way of trees, and then you see a big tree with a lot of leaves and a lot of those trees, you may be coming into the area of a stream or a little river, and that gives the moisture that these trees need. There's another tree or shrub that occupies roughly the same habitat, and that is the willow. And willow trees are not as big as cottonwoods. Their trunks are much smaller. The underside of the leaves frequently are silver in color. And so here we are in the willows. These branches are willow branches. I have a recollection that willow is a source of fiber and materials that some people have used to make things. In the corners of my memory, I'm recalling willow reed baskets made out of these little branches. I'm not an expert on basket weaving, but I do have a recollection that willow is used for that or a similar purpose. So we are on this open space county park. It's also used for horses. It's also an equestrian site. So people who live here in the Bay Area who have horses and want to ride these horses have a challenge of where can you ride the horse? And this equestrian park is suitable for horses. So one of the things that we have coming into view to my left, right here, is a watering trough for horses. This is the signage and map for this county park and the open space, and I took a look at it, and it is humongous. The open space is huge. So it's going to take some study. I have not spent a lot of time here. So I'm going to grab one of their brochures and study it, because there's a lot of complexity here. They have some trails that are for horses and hikers, but not bicycles. There are other trails that you're allowed to take a bicycle on. Now right here, there's a trail that's paved. So as I look at that, I don't think in terms of horse traffic, I think in terms of bicycle traffic. So I need to compare what I observe here to the regulations that are stated in the printed material. So I'm gonna do that. Behind me, there is a bowl-shaped depression in the ground, and over behind me now, there's a big concrete structure that looks like it could be used to regulate water in and out of that. So I'm going to construe that this is a pond to help manage water. Now, California has an interesting climate, because this part of California, we get a great deal of rain over a period of like 3 months. And then after that, for 9 months out of the year, you have little or no rain. And so, given what we do here in California and how many people we have, the authorities need to be responsible for conserving the water resources that we do have. So there are a lot of efforts in place where the rain comes during that 3-month period of time and it gets captured and put into reservoirs and many times returned to the aquifer so that we can use it at a later time. So I'm construing that this depression behind me is a structure for that purpose, for managing water resources. Parks like this that are near to urban centers create an interesting problem for people because our expectations are set by our experiences. So people who live in urban or suburban settings don't expect to encounter wild animals, at least not very often. If you talk to somebody who lives in the suburbs, their thought about wild animals would be like dogs and cats. I'm joking, of course. But occasionally a possum or raccoon might come by the house and take advantage of our hospitality. But we don't expect to run into wild animals on a day-to-day basis. And then these same folks go out to a park or an open space like this, which is substantially wilderness. And then they can be surprised by what they run into. So this park has signs up explaining some of the living creatures that are resident here that you could run into. Rattlesnakes. Now, rattlesnakes for most people pose no risk. They're not stalking humans. They're looking for small rodents. They're not looking for us. If you get involved with a rattlesnake, it could be because you didn't see it and happened upon it by accident. Or for some members of our society, it could be because you chose to try to catch it or pick it up. And that's a pretty effective way of getting oneself bitten by a rattlesnake. So there are a fair number of people on this trail, which is not a bad thing. They're very well behaved. Behind me, you can see people on the ridge, and there are some deer up there. And these deer are pretty familiar with the presence of humans. They don't seem very confounded by our presence, and they're not running away shy of humans. Other creatures you could run into out here in the wilderness would include coyotes. Again, they're not stalking humans, so if you give them some space, they'll stay clear of you. They don't want a human encounter at all. Mountain lions are kind of a gray area because there have been mountain lion attacks. They're not common. They're much feared because a mountain lion is a very large animal and severe injuries can occur. And they have posted recommendations about what to do if you encounter a mountain lion. Basically, you don't want to run. You want to look big. And so they recommend you put your hands over your head and wave. Keep eye contact with the mountain lion and then kind of gradually back away. More importantly, don't approach a mountain lion on purpose. If you see one, stay clear of it. There's no need to approach a mountain lion. A lot of wild animals out here in the wilderness are going to be seen more at dusk or even after dark. Animals like raccoons and possums are more likely to be seen after dark, if seen at all. This time of day, I would be surprised to see a raccoon or a possum. Here we We have a doe and 2 fawns. There's a small one and then a bigger one. They're very well concealed in this brush. They can travel, and most often you don't see them at all. They're just moving silently through the brush. This bush here is an invasive species. This is star thistle. I believe it came here from Europe. The story I got about star thistle is that it was the result of importing fodder for animals with early settlers in the U.S., in North America, and that when they brought feed for their animals, that included some star thistle, and it became an invasive species here. It's a super big nuisance. People used to respond to star thistle by spraying it with herbicide, specifically with Roundup. Roundup is also called glyphosate. And Roundup is somewhere between evil and controversial. It was made by a Monsanto corporation, as I recall, and there were a lot of allegations that glyphosate caused cancer in humans and other health problems, and there was a lot of litigation about this. I'm not an expert on that, but having read about that, I decided a long time ago to not use herbicide to control weeds on our property. Many years ago, we lived on a small ranch in the Central Valley of California near Sacramento, and there was a lot of star thistle. And back in that era, I did not know about the risks of Roundup. So I sprayed a fair amount of it. Now, I would prefer other methods to control it other than herbicides. You have very few choices. The big deal is getting rid of the seeds, because 1 year to the next, you just get more and more of this invasive species, and it's the seeds that cause the proliferation. So if you can eliminate the seeds, then you can try to get a handle on the problem. This open space is under the jurisdiction of local government, and it is not up to me to set policy on how to manage this invasive species by any means, no. Okay, so we're climbing a little hill, and we got a little bit of information coming up because on the ground there are some droppings, almost certainly from a horse. So this we can construe as an equestrian trail. You can see now behind me that lower area with the cottonwood trees and the willows. That's around a stream. There's flowing water there. Here we're in the shade of an oak tree. I stepped off the equestrian path, mostly to let hikers go by. So this has been only a little peek at this park. It is huge, and there are no doubt a lot of opportunities to explore here that I simply don't have time to do today. So I'm gonna head back down to the car, but on the way I'm gonna grab one of the brochures and study it, because there are lots of things to know about this park, so that when I come back I can make better use of it. One of the things I do want to do is follow their rules. So anytime you have a shared space like a public park, the authorities that have jurisdiction over that park set up the rules, and they do it for good reason. So as somebody coming to visit a park, I want to follow those rules and be a good citizen. that's easier to do if you know what the rules are. So I'm going to grab the brochure, take it home and study it, and then I'm going to plan a future excursion here, perhaps more than one. What comes to mind right now is I can't come here with a horse because I don't have a horse. I can come here on foot, and that's for sure going to happen. The other thing is I can bring a bicycle, but the bicycle is restricted to certain trails. So I need to have a plan on where I'm going to use this bicycle and not violate the rules of the park. Got to be a good citizen. So that's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed this little brief visit and discussion at a county park here in Northern California. I invite you to come back and join us in other videos, and perhaps other videos at this wonderful and very big park. So see you then. Bye.